Hello, everyone, and welcome to Easy Math with Teach Alex. So in today's video, we're going to be talking a little bit more about factoring. In my last video, we tackled about factoring the difference of two squares. Now, let's move on to the next type of factoring, which is factoring the perfect square trinomial. And this is an example of a perfect square trinomial. So bakit nga ba siya tinawag na perfect square trinomial? Notice that the first term and the last term of the trinomial are both squares because x squared has the square root of x and 4 has the square root of 2. Okay? And the middle term is twice the square root of the first and last term, or twice these square roots. So like 2 times x times 2 is 4x. Okay, so that is how you can determine if a given trinomial is a perfect square trinomial. Another example would be 9x squared plus 48xy squared plus 64 y to the 4th. Okay. So first, we need to verify if the first term and the last term are perfect squares. And they are, because 9 has the square root of 3 and also x. And 64 has the square root of 8 and also y squared. So both of these terms are perfect squares, okay? And then the middle term is 2 times, okay? 2 times the product of these square roots. And that will give us 2 times 3 is 6 times 8 is 48, x, y squared, okay? So therefore, these are the things that you should consider to determine if a given trinomial is a perfect square trinomial. Now, how do we factor a perfect square trinomial? Okay. So note that a perfect square trinomial is the result of squaring a binomial. A perfect square trinomial has first and last terms, which are perfect square, and a middle term, which is twice the product of the square root of the first and last terms, okay? So since it is stated that a perfect square trinomial is the result of squaring a binomial, so if you're going to factor this out, it should come out like this. A square of a binomial, okay? And that is in factored form. So how are we going to factor this given example? As soon as we know that a perfect square trinomial, a trinomial or a given trinomial is a perfect square trinomial, then we're gonna have to follow these procedures. First, we need to find the square root of the first term, okay? So x squared has the square root of x, and that becomes the first term of the binomial factor, okay? Next is we need to find the square root of the last term, which is 3, and that becomes your second term of the binomial factor. And lastly is to just copy the sign of the middle term, which is a positive. And that completes this factorization. Get it? So let's try another example. So first we need to verify if this if this trinomial is a perfect square trinomial by getting the square roots of the first term and the square root of the last term. So that is x, and this has a square root of 8. Next is to determine if 16x is twice the product of these square roots. So that is 2 times x times 8 is 16x. So it is a perfect square trinomial. Okay, next is to write this down in factored form, which is the binomial factor. So x is the first term of the binomial factor, and 8 is the second term. And since the middle term has a positive sign, so that means 8 is also positive. So what you just need to do is to just copy the sign of the middle term, okay? And that completes our factoring. So this is our final answer in factored form. That means this is how a perfect square trinomial is factored. Okay. All right. And now let's have, we'll see. Okay, so what if we're going to do the opposite? Like if we're going to have a problem like this itself. So we have a square of a binomial, right? So how are we going to square a binomial factor? So basically the resulting product would be this, a perfect square trinomial, okay? So, so in squaring a binomial, okay, first we need to, so this is the pattern, all right? This is the pattern in squaring a binomial. So first is we need to square the first term, that is x squared. Next, to get the middle term, which is this one, is to multiply by 2 the product of the first term and the second term, which is 8. Okay, so x and 8. And to get the last term, we need to square the last term. Okay, so we have x squared plus 2 times x times 8 is 16x plus 8 times 8 is 64. So we have a perfect square trinomial. All right, so the resulting product is obtained by squaring a binomial. And this is called a perfect square trinomial. So that's it. And that marks the end of our lesson for this session. And have a great day. Bye.